I'm now recording, and you are a pair of cocks.
Pair of cocks, yeah.
You are?
Yeah. He
Sir?
No, how can he be a pair of cocks? He's only one person.
He showed us one gun.
Well, I've got to wind back now and introduce him again.
Yeah. So,
But in another way, can you challenge
Eason.
your team? Can you challenge your team to do it in another way, more interesting way than the first time?
yes, yeah, great. Please do.
Okay.
Please do. If you
I've
could
got to be
blow slightly
mysterious
more
about
smoke
that.
up my arse next time, that would be better.
Adam Eason is just a complete dick. We've been 10 minutes into this podcast before he realised he had to record himself, so he'd obviously never read the emails. But he does know a little bit about hypnosis and NLP.
I'm just going to give you the ultimate retort to that comment of "you are a dick" and just say, "No, you are."
Yeah, no, you are to infinity and one.
Yeah.
So there you go. You can't beat that.
No, you
Nobody
are
can
to
beat
infinity plus one, no returns.
I don't even know what that means.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm a dick. Shut the fuck up a minute. Let's get this out. So Adam's a hypnotherapist. Is also a trainer of hypnotherapy and I believe NLP. I think this is not interesting. NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I'm just going to do this so boring now after you telling me to be interesting because I don't know what interesting sound like. It's like anyway. True. So, but here's the thing with Adam. He questions the status quo. And I don't mean for those of you listening in the UK, which will probably just be Adam after we put this up. It's not the band's the status quo, the actual status quo. So, tell us a bit about yourself. I can't be asked to do any more of this. I'll carry on drinking my orange super drink.
So I worked within this field since my early 20s. And so I left university with a hankering for it and spent essentially self-hypnosis and hetero-hypnosis were things that I'd encountered therapeutically to help overcome some issues of my own. And I went to university and decided this was the sort of direction that I wanted to go in. And having left university, I spent a year doing the only job I've ever had, and then became self-employed and have been a hypnotherapist ever since. Back in the late 1990s, I started teaching for the first time my passion, which is self-hypnosis. And my first book was published in the early 2000s. It happens to be a book that is still to date my bestseller. Still to date been translated into more languages than any of my others, and still to date the book that I am currently the most embarrassed about in my entire career. It was based upon a premise that I refute heartily today. And so my training school developed and grew. And today, that's kind of where we're at. We have audio products and books that are all related to hypnosis.
Yeah. And go here. Here's the link to click. Is that the next line?
towards the latter end, and the more recent years, I stumbled across an opportunity. I run several marathons every year, and I run ultra marathons as well. And about 10 years ago, I encountered, and I basically had this and found out and discovered that I derived a rather perverse pleasure from using psychological interventions to overcome the pain towards the end of marathons or towards the end of an ultra marathon, You're at mile 40 and you've still got another 10 miles to run. That could be quite soul destroying for lesser people. With that in mind, what I attempted to do, and then I started to research heavily the ways in which hypnosis had ever been used to work with runners. And of course, hypnotherapy, hetero-hypnosis, for example, is used to overcome pain, to affect mood and elevate mood. It's used to deal with anxiety and manage arousal levels. It's also utilized as far as a wide number of applications are concerned, including things like altering your perceived level of effort. And all of these things were very importable as far as hypnosis and running was concerned. And so a number of years ago, I wrote a book on that subject. I started a blog that was just a kind of little mini project. It was rather self-indulgent, to be quite honest. And it became incredibly popular. I had former Olympians as clients. I have a multi-world record holding ultra runner as clients, world champion fighters, and all kinds of stuff that all moved into running, that all became really interested in what we were doing. So that takes up a lot of my time as well, that sort of stuff. And so the training, the hypnosis for running, and I'm running my own practice, my own consulting rooms here on the south coast of England where I live. That's essentially it, in as much of a nutshell as I can give you it.
A nutshell? I want a fucking nutshell.
It's a huge
how big is this fucking nut that you've got that you could have got that into its shell?
For everybody listening, I abhor the potty mouthness that is being directed. Okay, I in no way implicitly agree with the potty mouth that is Tim, but okay. I'm prepared to let that stuff fly.
Okay, thank you.
You're such a gentleman.
Heterohypnosis, isn't that what the right-wing church use over here to convert gay people?
Well,
we're going to use heterohypnosis on you now. So explain what heterohypnosis is. In a fucking nutshell, a real nutshell this time.
Heterohypnosis compared to self-hypnosis, the self-hypnosis is a self-directed form of hypnosis, and when we're talking about heterohypnosis, I'm talking about hypnosis. I could quite easily have just said it without the hetero component. It just means one-to-one.
You've been pretentious.
Yeah. Well, I was just essentially demonstrating the degree of highbrowness on my part.
Yes, that you've got and we haven't. Yeah.
By slinging in some multi-syllabic words here and there, just so that people think I'm a clever clogs or something.
Please remember, I'm French. English is my second language, so I don't understand a single thing of what you just said. So please use simple words for me.
Sure.
Sure. And I'm from the north, and I'm from north of England. I had no clue what you're talking about either.
Actually, I don't have a clue. I don't know anything about hypnosis, right? Nothing, right?
Sure.
I'm not trained just like the team. Team is you have a training team on hypnotherapy or whatever things like.
Yes,
that, I believe. But for me, I don't know how it works. So can you like in a nutshell again explain how does it work, this thing?
Well, as far as I'm concerned,
I'm just going for a short nap. Okay, give me a shout when he's done.
So, as far as I'm concerned, it's nothing to do with trance. It's nothing to do with altered states of consciousness. And the vast majority of academics that have contributed in any significant fashion to this field tend to agree upon a more socio-cognitive explanation of hypnosis. And that sounds like a long word again, but the socio part is a sort of behavioral component. That is, you adopt the role of hypnotized subject. You are motivated appropriately. You assume control for the outcomes and so on. And the cognitive part is just that you adopt the right kind of attitude. It's a series of very ordinary psychological processes that are combined to become what we refer to and what we talk about as hypnosis. A lot of people talk in this rather nonsensical fashion, which makes hypnosis very intangible a lot of the time. A lot of people use certain language patterns, for example, and think that is somehow what hypnosis is all about, bypassing the conscious mind. And that's something that the vast majority of academics tend to refute. Anybody that is significant, from the creator of modern hypnosis, James Braid, through to all the major academics throughout the decades that I could list here but shall not today, those guys don't even acknowledge, they don't refute the notion of an unconscious mind even. They don't refute it because it's just not on their radar. It's not something to discuss. And a lot of people explain hypnosis in terms of it's somehow a method to access the unconscious mind. Yet neuroscience, cannot prove that there is such an existence of such a thing. We do things unconsciously, but to suggest that there is some sort of benevolent, all-wise, all-seeing, unconscious mind residing within us that knows better than we know that we know, or something like that, is still unproven. And I very often get people that say to me, yeah, but you can't prove there's not one, can you either? And, you know, the responsibility for proving is in people that are suggesting that there is something of that nature. So that's kind of the direction, that's kind of the place that I'm in as far as hypnosis is concerned, that it's not an altered state of consciousness, and it's not anything to do with accessing your unconscious mind.
Okay.
Well, next to
it's a skill set.
There's no law of attraction. No, we'll get on to that. I want to.
I still have no clue how does it work. To be honest, you just spoke for 5 minutes.
Sure. So it's a skill set. What I would do if you were coming to see me, if you were coming to see me, if you were coming to see me,
I'm coming to you, and I say this is my problem. You know, I have a very annoying co-host. You know, and I would like him to shut up a little bit more. Please help me.
Sure. Well, you know, there's probably far more effective means than hypnosis for dealing with that one.
Don't invite me on the Skype chat. Would be the easiest way probably to do that.
Yeah, or work out ways of sending high voltage electricity through Skype.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Because I want to come back to the unconscious mind thing, because that's the first and we'll put a link to Adam's book. That's the first when I got into that and I was reading that, I was thinking. It's kind of like, so I subscribe to everything that you just said. And I swallowed the, you know, for probably for the vast majority of people that know anything about hypnosis, Milton Erickson's probably the most famous person, and the whole field of Ericksonian hypnosis, which is kind of described like Adam was talking about in terms of getting past using an artfully vague language, or the Milton model of language, to get past the conscious mind to the unconscious mind. But here's the thing that I started thinking a while ago, it's yes, go on.
I was thinking, could I make some reference to the Ericksonian model? Because a lot of academics, a lot of scholars, for example, even would suggest that the Ericksonian model ought not even be referred to as hypnosis, because the very mechanisms by which it proposes to work and be effective isn't the same as the way that plain speaking direct suggestion type of hypnosis is utilized. First and foremost, the vast majority of hypnosis research is used just with plain speaking direct suggestions. So is it right, therefore, that Ericksonian field can hang on the shirt tails of all that research when indirect suggestion is virtually non-existent within the evidence base for the field of hypnosis? But second of all, this idea of using language patterns to somehow circumvent the client's awareness is fundamentally, it fundamentally rankles with the ethics of a cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy approach, for example. So, within a sort of model that I tend to adhere to, it's very much about being collaborative, about engaging that individual within it and letting them feel in control and building self-efficacy, whereby they feel capable and in control themselves and not reliant upon a third party. And so a lot of people say to me, yeah, but the Erickson model helps to bypass resistance, and it's not really any evidence to suggest that. It's not, I have no issue whatsoever, and I can find some value in utilizing those methods. But the Erickson model, the idea of it being a trance, the idea of accessing the unconscious mind, those kinds of things, is criticized by a lot of the academic field. And so, I just thought I would mention that at this point.
Okay. So as I was saying...
yeah, before you were rudely interrupted.
Well, and again, like I say, my opinion on a lot of NLP and hypnosis, and that has changed massively just in the last two or 3 years, really. And I've got some blog posts that I'm embarrassed about now, but anyway... I wasn't silly enough to write a book on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like who?
Yeah, I don't know. So what I started to think about is the whole consciousness thing. It's like, so when I got into meditation, you often, even when you shut your thoughts down, which for me is very difficult, even after 7 or 8 years, you're always aware that you've shut your thoughts down. So it's almost to me like there's almost like different levels. Do you know what I mean? There's a conscious, like, I know I'm looking at you now on my screen and I'm talking to you, but there's also something like, you know, you may refute this, but there's also an awareness of other things that are going on as well. And then am I making sense? Do you know, so it's just like, you can't say, well, there's just the conscious and the unconscious. It's almost like shades of grey as to how aware we are of things that are going around us.
Sure. But by refuting that there is such a thing as an unconscious mind, I'm not necessarily talking about levels of consciousness. I mean, the entire notion of hypnosis, a lot of people talk about depth, for example, the depth of their experience. But that tends to be a bit of a misnomer as well. You know, a lot of hypnotists, for example, correlate success with the depth of trance, and really that's a bit of a misnomer, because, you know, that they're required to be engaged in the process. You know, in order for hypnosis to be effective, for example, the client must be able to access their own cognitions, must be able to instigate their own mental imagery process, must be able to feel motivated, must be able to perceive it in a favorable fashion. But when we're talking about sort of levels of consciousness and levels of awareness, I think that's potentially something, a different discussion that I might not necessarily be the best person to discuss that on. I'm not as well versed or you know, have as much information and knowledge. But we do things unconsciously. There's no doubt about it. I'm not suggesting that we don't. We do things unconsciously. What I'm suggesting is that we don't necessarily have a separate entity that resides within us, that somehow is a benevolent force, that somehow knows better than we know. I get a lot of people say to me, you must trust your instincts. You must trust your intuition and your unconscious mind, for example. And I say to them, well, you know what? Your instincts aren't always doing the best for you. Someone comes to see me, they stop smoking, and a couple of days later they go to the newsagents to buy a copy of the Daily Sport. And while they're there, they see the cigarettes on the back counter, and they start calling out to that person, "Come on, smoke me," because cigarettes have gravelly voices, right? And they're saying, "Come on, smoke me," and the person is thinking, "Oh, that would be quite nice to smoke them." Their gut feelings are telling them to smoke, and they need to refute that thought with an element of will or an element of intelligent reasoning. With that in mind, you know, I think we don't ignore instincts and intuition. Of course not. That would be foolish. But we also appreciate that we can add intelligent reasoning and critical thinking to advance it. And, you know, to put all of our faith in this sort of benevolent, intangible force that sits or resides within us, I think doesn't make a huge amount of sense.
No, well, I agree 100%. I mean, there's a lot of dead people who trusted the gut and went for something, you know. And I think, you know, even though I really enjoyed Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, I thought it was a great book, it's still kind of, it didn't, and Gladwell has a habit of doing this, not looking at the other side of the story. Because, you know, like I say, there are people that you trust your gut. We've all had gut instincts that prove to be wrong. You ask anybody, you know, there's people that have invested money or people, you know, whatever. So there was an example I read not that long ago. It was about it was a fire that had broken out on some I don't know, some grassland or whatever, and there were 3 people there. And your gut instinct tells you to run, but one guy stopped and thought, and there was like a hollow, and he actually got down in there, pulled stuff over him, and the other 2 died. And but he stopped to think. Do you know what I mean? What should it, you know? There's no way I'm going to outrun this. So it's kind of like his gut was telling him that to run. So I think I definitely agree with that. You know, I've had people tell me your guts. You see it on picture. Your gut instinct's always right. I fucking don't grow up. You know, although I used to believe that, but I've grown up. So yes.
Really?
So no, not really.
No, not
really. Do you think oh, go on. Did you want to ask something?
No, I wanted to go back to a very simple question.
What's hypnosis?
No, really.
Yeah,
because you're going to very much in this. Okay, so look, I have a drinking problem. Okay, I drink a lot of beers during this podcast. I come to you and I say, okay, I really want to quit this. Can you help?
Sure, but that's a very different question to what is hypnosis. You know, I'm offering up a rationale and a treatment plan for dealing with alcoholism, for example, is a very different question to what is hypnosis. What is hypnosis then? It's a cognitive set, a cognitive skill, a series of very ordinary psychological processes whereby I will offer up a series of things for you to engage your imagination in. I will educate you upon the role for you to adopt. I will have a conversation and educate you with regards to that in very simple terms. It's being focused, expectancy, having a certain attitude towards it. And these are just very ordinary psychological processes, which when you engage in them all at once, you become suggestible. Suggestible either to your own thoughts or to that of a hypnotist that's working with you. It's very sober. I realise that sounds very sober, very ordinary. But I love that. I would much rather undersell and over-deliver on the results as far as hypnosis is concerned, rather than talk in terms of over-delivering it as being magical, intangible, reliant upon me shazamming you, and so, yeah. For me, then, the explanation I would give is that it's a cognitive set, a mindset that you adopt, whereby you adopt the role of hypnotized subject, and I would educate on that. You adopt a certain attitude, a favorable attitude towards it. You realize that you are in control. You be expectant. And with regards to the hypnotic phenomena that we engage in, you imagine that it's happening non-volitionally. It's happening all by itself. You make things your reality. Probably the best example for me to give is a real hero of mine from the 1920s, a man called Emile Coué. Emile Coué wrote a book called Autosuggestion. He's the guy that had the famous affirmation. He created that famous affirmation, every day in every way I'm getting better.
You mean that Pink Panther didn't make that? Sorry.
But he rejected the field of hypnosis. He rejected heterohypnosis. And because people could just refute the suggestions that he was giving them. So instead, he taught a method of people to effectively communicate with themselves. And so the hypnotist role is no way near as important as lots of hypnotists would like it to be. And they get quite pissy with me when I suggest that, But there is really credible evidence that says hypnotic phenomena is far more dependent upon the individual being hypnotized than it is about the artistry of the therapist or the hypnotist. And people are like, yeah, but I want to, I'm an artist. I want to wear tie-dye, long flowing dresses and play Babushka by Kate Bush in the background. I want to be able to express these skills. But, it's less about the hypnotist. It's far more about the individual. It's about them adopting a very particular mindset. In the 1990s, the biggest researcher in our field of all time, Irving Kirsch, described hypnosis as a non-deceptive mega placebo. That is, that very often the expectancy just makes it work. And we were talking about NLP, for example. Irving Kirsch tested the fast phobia cure in clinical trials over and over and over again. And they could find no results. They could find no efficacy. They could not repeat the success that everybody that was using the fast phobia cure, that was a fan of it, was suggesting the success they were suggesting they got with it. And one of the explanations of this is that a lot of NLP practitioners that use it believe in it so heavily. They're so invested in it. They're so offended when people like me say something like that, that they dogmatically entrench themselves and become, absolutely and defend it to the point whereby their belief carries it into that session because they believe in it so much. If they believed as much in the wet fish that they're holding, that they're then slapping around the face of their client, there's a chance that would be efficacious. If you've got a good rapport, a good working alliance, and you firmly believe in whatever you're doing, there's a strong likelihood that it will be effective. But in clinical trials, they really struggled to get anything like effective results with fast phobia cure, for example. We digressed a bit there.
No, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I wrote a post on NLP called NLP Science or Magic, and but when I'm training other coaches, I do teach. I do go into submodalities and explain that to a little bit, and I do tell them after I've done it and demoed it. If you can't deliver this with complete confidence, then it's probably not going to work, because I have no clue how it works. I'm not even sure if it does work, other than the belief, because we know, one of the things that we've sort of started to realise over the last, I was going to say 10 years, but I think it goes way back further than that. But where people, it's become more, is he checking? Oh no, he's looking at his beer. I thought he was checking his phone then.
I thought he was looking at his own flies.
Yeah, okay.
No,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it's the power, the incredible power of the human belief system. And as to me as a coach, I will big something up with a client, because I want to take their expectations up there. If it then doesn't work, then okay, I have to deal with the repercussions of that. But for the most part, it does. I think it comes back to something important you were saying before about suggestion. The power of suggestion, and so yeah.
Especially if there is belief invested in it. If you're giving suggestion, if you're giving suggestion to a client and they perceive you as being credible, you have a good working alliance between the two of you, a good therapeutic working alliance between the two of you, and then you engage in a ritual such as you frame the entire thing as hypnosis. It's going to have an effect. There's something that's going to have an effect. There's a really interesting piece of research done that showed that when CBT was being done on clients, when it was labelled hypnosis, even when hypnosis was not
cognitive behavioural therapy, for anybody that's listening.
Yeah, cognitive. Yeah, not the other type of CBT.
Well, somebody may not know what it means.
Perhaps people that watch too much pornography. I'm getting it confused. So CBT, when CBT is labelled hypnosis, it becomes more effective, even when hypnosis is not done, because of the perception, the perception of it being powerful. Interestingly, meta-analyses have also proven that CBT, its efficacy is advanced when hypnosis is used in conjunction with it, as a little side nugget for your listeners there as well.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
I'm lost.
You're always lost.
No, not always.
Well, most of the time.
Okay, let me look at my fly then.
Yeah, you go and look at your fly. Yes, very interesting.
Yeah.
So you said something interesting before about language patterns and the ethics of using language patterns, because obviously, for anybody listening doesn't know what language patterns is, well, do you want to explain it? Because I'm just going to explain it. You're going to say, well, actually.
Well, there's a premise. There's a premise that if you use language, you bypass people's conscious awareness, and you're getting stuff in there. So a lot of people learn these for potentially for manipulative purposes. There's a huge seduction community out there that teach each other how to use language patterns to help get laid. There's a huge swathes of this being used for the advancement of sales. But language patterns whereby they're used to influence and persuade and develop. For me, I find a lot of it confusing. I find much of it just very confusing and unintelligible. Some of the kind of quadruple bind, double confusional language patterns that get taught out there. And people treat them like the Venus's arms, if only I could learn and speak as fluently as my teacher, my life will be awesome. And I think that sometimes people would just appreciate understanding what's happening. So language patterns are taught, in particular, the field of NLP, copied and pasted, if you like, the structure of which both Virginia Satir asked questions and the way that Milton Erickson created altered states within people by the use of his language and tonality. And then created from that the Milton model and the meta model, which are two models central to the field of NLP. One is asking questions designed to become aware of what people's inner reality is, and one is to do quite the opposite, to artfully vague suggest things in order that the client projects their own meaning onto it, or to circumvent resistance. And that's the idea behind things like metaphor and some of the language patterns, is to embed messages within the language patterns that, so, like I said, step over their conscious awareness and are somehow in their unconscious mind. Which is an interesting thing that quite annoyed me. The very first hypnosis experience I ever had, I can remember thinking to myself, this is a really nice man. This is a lovely experience. That's some lovely dolphin music that he's playing in the background. And, that's a lovely Hush FM DJ voice that he's adopted. I was expecting him every now and then to start saying, and a big hello to all you truckers out there, or something like that. But instead, he carried on, he persisted. And at the end of it, I felt like I'd had a small nap. And I remember saying to him, so what's happened? What happened? Has the change happened to me? Did I get a lightning bolt up the arse during that session? And, because
it wasn't a lightning bolt.
Because I can't remember what happened. And he said to me, don't worry. Your unconscious remembered everything. And I remember feeling that was a rather impotent therapeutic experience for me, because I wanted to make sense of it. I wanted to know what was going on, and had no idea.
So back to language patterns. I'll get to the question I was going to ask you. So I actually still think Structure of Magic, which was the first NLP book, or Structure of Magic Volume 1, is highly useful for me as a coach to understand. And basically, it's just about the surface structure and the deep structure of language in terms of what people say and what they actually mean. Yeah. But this is a question I wanted to ask you. So you're talking about the ethics of using language patterns. And I know what you're saying about sales, because we were taught, my last sales job that I ever had, they brought in some NLP trainers to train this stuff, and then you've got to be a bit dubious about it. But what about the ethics if the intent is good? Do you still, to me, so if I use language patterns, or if I'm using any techniques like that with clients, I'm doing it to help them get where they want to be.
Sure.
Not because I'm trying to manipulate. I suppose it's still manipulation aspect, in the technical sense. But do you still draw a line there, even if it's going to be for the greater good?
Yeah. Because
fuck off then.
For me, therapy is a collaborative process. I want them to feel like they are an active agent in the process, that they are properly engaged with it. So the model which I adhere to then would draws that and makes that. Of course, from time to time, I can understand a language pattern being slipped in here or there that might advance what you are doing. I can understand that, but attempting to get things beyond a client's awareness just strikes me as being not what therapy is about.
Well, I'm not a therapist. I'm a coach. I want to make that difference, and I don't. And I know what I'm talking. We're blurring the lines a little bit here, and I'm not trying to say, oh, it's okay because I'm a life coach, but it wouldn't be okay if I was a therapist. But I'm gonna, and I understand what you're saying. It is a collaborative. Life coaching should always be. It's coactive coaching is what I was trained in. However, I still think. I actually tend to disagree with that. I still think you can have a collaborative relationship without, and still be able to use the occasional language pattern. Or do you want to give us an example of something? So if anybody's listening, they may be thinking we're talking about language patterns. Give us an example.
So if someone was using, so if, for example, client came into my office and I said, have a seat. I don't know if you're going to be most relaxed with your feet on the stool or on the floor. So I'm creating the illusion of choice there with that suggestion. The presupposition being that they're going to be relaxed. Okay, you are going to be relaxed, regardless of whether but I'm giving them the illusion of choice to choose whether their feet are on the floor or on the stool. And that sounds very lovely and very nice. I have no issue with that. It's when you get a douchebag junior salesman that says, do you want to sign the contract with this pen or yours? Which is the same kind of thing. But you get the point, the point that I'm making here is that, let me strike a difference between working alliance and rapport, okay? Rapport is something that generally tends to be looked at. Rapport is something that you have on a date, or rapport is something that you have with your friends in a pub. It tends to be desired by people wanting to get along and be friends and have each other like each other. Good quality therapy, for example, doesn't necessarily, that's not always that useful, that we get on and that we must agree. On the contrary, you can still have a good, effective therapeutic alliance and disagree because they perceive you as being credible. They perceive you as being the professional. They respect you. And once you've got a working alliance, research upon research upon research across all talk therapies shows the efficaciousness of the treatment is advanced as a result of having that working alliance. It's not about us being friends and getting on, because you can disagree on points, but still have professional respect that works its way into the results. And so with that in mind, I think it tends to become, I think that rapport is very often seen as the most important thing that you do. And I think, it can blind us. You can have a very good therapeutic relationship without necessarily liking people, as long as you've got respect and so on.
I definitely want to come in there because, first of all, I think, if you haven't got rapport, nobody's going to hire you in the first place. If you're on the phone with somebody, it's incredibly difficult to get somebody to hire you, especially as a coach. I'm going to, we keep drifting to therapy because I know that's what you do, Adam, and I'm fine with that. But I want to just keep distinguishing between the lines. But as a coach, people don't hire you if they don't like you. Period. I don't think I've ever had a client hire me. And I would say with clients, it is important to build rapport to begin with.
But also, do you ever challenge your clients?
Yes, of course I do. But you can still be in rapport and challenge somebody. There's various levels of rapport, So yeah, I get to the point sometimes with clients where I'm in such a high level of rapport. I once said to a client one time, and I'm not going to do it here, but I know there's a technical term, what's going on here, and I wrote in a big marker pen, "You're a fucking idiot," and turned and showed it him. It was actually a face-to-face client, and we both just clapped, we were just laughing for about 5 minutes, and now he's one of my best friends. So yeah, I do challenge clients a lot. I have to. If you can't challenge your clients, you're fucked as a coach. You've got to be able to challenge them.
I absolutely hear that, and that makes a lot of sense. And of course, and essentially, you're describing what I am talking about. But the differentiation that I want to make is that it's not everything. It's not the all and all that we must get on, because people can still invest in your services and respect what you do on a professional level. I have lots of people that get very offended by some of the things that I've spoken about today because it's challenged their original training. God forbid you should ever do that. It's challenged their original training. But I tell you what, they come on my courses. Even though they don't like what I'm saying very much. And so I don't have rapport with them necessarily. Eventually, I'd like to think that I'd find time to really go and have a pint with them and so on. But that's not as important to me. What's important is that I can develop a relationship where they learn more information, or that they expand their knowledge, they develop their skills and things like that. So I'm not disagreeing with the premise that you've just offered up, because I think that's a really, really very valid point. What I'm suggesting is that, especially in therapy, it's not the be-all, end-all. It's not that we must get on. We must get on. We must like each other, because at times in therapy, there's going to be a challenging journey, and they might be thinking, you know what, some of those challenges that have been made, I found a bit uncomfortable, but I respect it. I like what I'm doing. Sometimes people go and see their doctor. They respect what their doctor's doing and they appreciate it. But the doctor could potentially be, an obnoxious person. But there can still be efficacy of a treatment, for example.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's interesting though that those doctors are far, far more likely to get sued than doctors that are really nice, where the patient likes them, but they're fucking completely incompetent.
Sure.
It's because again, that shows the power of rapport. If you like somebody, you're probably going to take in. Anyway, I've stopped you mid-flow then. I don't know how I managed to do it, to be quite honest.
I'm taking a lot of shit from you guys today. Well done.
Not really. I didn't say anything for 30 minutes.
Doing a gun show.
No, I was actually punching my arms in the air.
Yeah, but it's ridiculous. Come on. Can I ask you something, actually, Adam, after shutting up for 30 minutes, listening and try to make sense of all this in my small head and small French brain? You mentioned therapy, right? Yeah. And therapy is actually to cure or to fix someone or solve some. This is how I understand that, right? For therapy. So, why should I see you? What are the symptoms or causes? What are the typical cases of someone going to see you?
This is a really good question because I think typically people associate hypnosis and hypnotherapy with stopping smoking and weight reduction, for example. Yet, we've got much better evidence for things that might sound much more complex. So overcoming a wide range of anxiety disorders, overcoming pain, pediatric applications of hypnosis, where kids that have leukemia, for example, or cancer, have lumbar punctures, has shown that use of hypnosis to overcome that pain, which is perceived as being some of the worst pain imaginable, that is a really great typical application of hypnosis. Overcoming insomnia, dealing with anxiety, as I mentioned earlier, mood elevation, and advanced performance. These are all very typical. Stopping smoking, actually, the evidence base is nowhere near as impressive as you would imagine. With the exception of a couple of studies that have proven to be flawed, some of the highest success rates that we have is 50%. It's massively more impressive than nicotine replacement therapy, but it's still not really that amazing. And here in the UK especially, there's this sort of want and this desire amongst hypnosis professionals to do one session, a single session, stop smoking, come and see us. And the evidence shows that if you do 3 or 4 sessions, for example, you're much more likely to have a long-lasting success. Yet, because it's marketed that way, people feel that they have to fall in line with stuff like that. And it's very frustrating, it's very difficult. But typically, hypnosis has really good evidence to suggest that you work with pain. You work with IBS. IBS, really great evidence base as far as that's concerned. Insomnia, anxiety disorders, depressive disorders. You probably wouldn't want to be the only therapist working with depression clients. I would probably recommend you being involved as part of a comprehensive treatment plan. But typically, those are the kinds of things that we tend to deal with and that we are better dealing with.
Do you do all your work face-to-face?
The vast majority of it, yes.
Yeah, okay. So what's your thought on doing that kind of work like as we're doing now on Skype?
Well, it depends, really. Hypnosis is quite an intimate thing, and it requires you to be very aware of that person's ongoing experience and be able to feed back, ratify their ongoing experience and so on. So I think hypnosis components, I would feel more inclined to want to do it face to face and be with that person. Especially sometimes some of the things involve, wanting to lift their arm and elicit certain types of hypnotic phenomena. Whereas, and that kind of stuff you can't really do by Skype. But if I was doing certain aspects of coaching, or if I'm in between sessions and I want to have a report or a feedback, then Skype becomes very valid. Loads of people out there do hypnosis on Skype.
That's what I was thinking. I was wanting to get your take on that.
Yeah, I've no objection to it, but my personal preference is that I would prefer to be in their company for the hypnosis part of it. All of that said, I do plenty of stuff by Skype.
Yeah, because I have a friend who's got erectile dysfunction, and he probably would want to know if he could do it.
It's me.
Yeah, it is. I'm fed up with it.
Erectile dysfunction is one of those things. It's one of those things whereby, the most impressive sex organ that we have is the brain. And
I was going to say mine's not very impressive. I don't know what you're talking about. But then you said the brain. Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah, it absolutely is the brain. And learning how to engage in that kind of mindset that I was talking about earlier on and be relaxed at the same time. One of the big things that Emile Coué spoke about, one of the things that inhibits suggestion from being effective is effort, excessive effort, trying to will something to happen. So if you have insomnia, for example, you wake up in the night trying to will yourself back to sleep, come on, sleep. It's not going to happen. If you are relaxed, you imagine it, you invest belief in it, you're motivated, you realize that you are in control and you're gently assured, you make it your reality, you adopt the role, all of those kind of ordinary psychological processes I spoke about, then it becomes a lot easier. With erectile dysfunction, if anybody listening has ever suffered from it, the worst thing you can do is try and will it up. Come on! It's just, it isn't going to happen. Doing that is the equivalent of whacking it with a cold spoon. That
doesn't work.
But this is what I mean.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. So, engaging the imagination, being gently reassured, one of the best ways to inhibit suggestions being effective is trying to will them and engage in too much excessive effort, either mental or physical effort.
Okay. Yeah, go on, Olivier.
Can I be honest with you? Because
I'm confused. That's what he's going to say.
I'm still confused, but that's my normal state, so you don't have to pay attention to that. But for me, I always been scared to try this hypnotherapy or hypnosis, this hypnosis thing. There's this kind of loss of control, right? This is because this is what you basically, the image when you look at the media, you see this guy on a stage and suddenly snapping his fingers and someone, went to sleep and he can do whatever he wants with it, with this person. And I've tried, ayahuasca, for instance, which is an alternative state of consciousness drug. I took that. I have no problem to take this kind of drugs, but I'm really scared to see someone like you, right? Because I'm really afraid of what can he do. Can I still be in control? Can I be in control during a session? Can you influence? You said about suggestions,
But you see, it's not about, it absolutely isn't about me doing something to you. That's the thing. The essence of it is a very collaborative process, Olivier. And, it seems nuts that people would be prepared to take certain mind-altering substances, yet would be afraid of. And, the stuff on stage, it creates a real misnomer because people are tested very often, that they've gone through a number of suggestibility tests. Also, the very framework of going for a show, okay? So the frame is so important with hypnosis. My father-in-law is a Bournemouth football fan, season ticket holder, okay? He is a very gentle-spoken man, lives in the country, and very quiet, loving, owns horses. Put him in the framework and the context of a football match, he is as much of a potty mouth as Tim is. He will, and so the framework and the context of a hypnosis show makes certain behaviors. There is a certain level of expectancy, as I was talking about. They're adopting the role of what they think should happen. They're responding in certain ways. When that myth is then perpetuated, it becomes very easy to slot into. Some people don't respond. They're the people that stay in the audience. When you see somebody like Derren Brown, for example, in his book Tricks of the Mind, he openly states the two main components that make people respond to him doing hypnosis are, first of all, who he is creates expectation within that person, and second of all, his ultimate confidence and belief in what he is doing. That combined with the context, the framework, plus only the stuff that gets on television is the stuff which goes successfully, not all of the time where he's gone up to someone and just gone, sleep. Some people have turned around and thought, Why? What are you talking about?
You are.
That's a bit unusual. Whereas there really is nothing to be afraid of, because actually it's a wholly collaborative process. You cannot, there are far better ways to manipulate people than using hypnosis. Far better. Get married. And that's far better way to be influenced for doing stuff. Have children. My kids manage to manipulate and influence me beyond anything a hypnotic intervention would do. I think it's misplaced. Often fear is created by misunderstanding. And the misunderstanding of what actually is involved. You are the one that must engage your imagination. You are the one that must access your cognitions. You are the one that must invest your belief in the process. You could simply, if someone was making suggestions to you, you could simply say no, and they would be rendered impotent. Hypnosis is not some unworldly force where you can just make people do stuff. Could you imagine if that were the case? Could you imagine, what this world would be like? Okay.
Yeah, I will join your school straight away.
Yeah, exactly.
But by the way, I've got to say, I thought Tricks of the Mind is a brilliant book. I love it.
It really is.
Yeah, I really like.
What I love about Darren's approach is, he is skeptical. He's a very healthy skeptic.
Oh yeah,
and he even spells it out in his show. He spells stuff out in his show. Yet people project the desire to believe in spooky stuff upon him. That even though he says, that this is nothing, and makes it very plain. That it's nothing to do with psychic ability or something like that. People still leave the auditorium going, "Oh my God, wow! It's like he was inside my head, man." And somehow they think that actually there was that kind of occurrence.
Actually, but at the same time, I've seen you. You have this video on YouTube. Actually, I've looked at 2 videos where you put someone into this rigid state, or they're just lying on the floor, and you can leave them. Yeah, catalepsy, and you put them between 2 chairs,
Yeah.
And this is one of the videos that, it's on your YouTube channel, and I say, oh shit, he's doing this kind of magic tricks, really, it's happening.
Yeah, the first point that I would say with regards to that is evidence has shown time and time again that anything that can be done in hypnosis can also be done out of hypnosis. It's just that hypnosis sometimes magnifies and amplifies the responsiveness to it, or magnifies the result. So anybody could do that with motivational suggestions, for example. You could get someone pumped up, talk them through a psychological process, and get them to turn their body rigid. People were doing that before there was anything known as hypnosis. Those kind of things. But likewise, when we then use hypnosis to adopt this mindset, to have expectancy, to have the motivation, to have the belief invested in it and everything else, and they adopt this mindset, they engage in that hypnotic process, it becomes more advanced. And, but they have to be involved. I couldn't just do that to them if they were thinking, no. If they were thinking to themselves, no, I'm a floppy jelly-like substance, and they believed that, and they invested their belief in it. Exactly. There'd be no way on earth I'd be able to get them to engage in that.
So, can I ask another question? Because there's also something you have your own podcast, and you mentioned that sometimes you don't agree with your guest, and you mentioned this today. You mentioned that most of the people don't agree with you, but people you're triggering some anger or something like that. You're kind of a rebel of this hypnotherapy. So can you?
Yeah.
What is your stance here?
Yeah. One of the big issues that I've encountered is that there is a chasm, a gulf within our field between academia and frontline hypnotherapy, and the two don't tend to get on very well. Academia don't, sometimes turn their nose up rather snootily at frontline hypnotherapists because they portray hypnosis sometimes in ways that the evidence would suggest is contrary, for example. And frontline hypnotherapists tend to think of academics well, they're not out there, they're not doing it. They're talking in theory, they're clinicians in a theoretical sense. So there's a real chasm. And one of the big challenges that I've attempted in the last sort of 6 to 10 years or so within my career, as I slowly developed within it, has been to attempt to bridge that and attempt to bridge that chasm. I'm quite an outspoken proponent against regression therapy, for example. I'm quite an outspoken proponent against the model of the unconscious mind. I don't talk about hypnosis as being a state, but on my hypnosis podcast, I have lots of people, real experts, that come on and we have these discussions and we talk. And even though fundamentally we disagree on our stance on hypnosis, they're all people that I would happily sit in a pub with till late at night and chew the fat and discuss and have that. And one of the issues that I have is whereby people take a personal affront to their models being challenged. How dare he say that? What a bastard. And use those kind of logical fallacies to refute you and say, well, no, what you said is wrong because you're a dick. Is not an intelligent response. It's not a way to argue your point. And a lot of the time, these people don't know the other side of the discussion. They don't know the other side of the argument. And so, end up not being able to contribute and have an adult discussion.
Well, it's the endowment effect, isn't it? They're so invested in what they believe. It's like somebody spent 10 years, and I can remember one time I used to go to football matches with my dad to watch Derby. Whoa, come on, you round. Anyway, and I found a shortcut, and he'd been driving to Derby for like 30 years from where we lived. He refused to believe there could possibly be a shortcut because, he was so invested because he'd gone the same way. He couldn't accept that he could have been wrong for 30 years, that there was this opposite way. And you see this all the time. It's like when people, somebody asked in a life coaching group on LinkedIn where there's about 30,000 members, who do you recommend for life coach training? And I actually said, this is the worst place to ask people who they recommend because everybody thinks their training was the best because they've all spent like 10 grand on the fucking training. And the brain's going to be... it takes a real sort of open-minded person to say, you know what, that fucking sucked. But this really did suck.
You make a really, really important point, and exactly that. People have invested in it. They've got personal belief and commitment invested in it. But let me just say and add a caveat there. Science is not about being right. Okay, they're not attempting to say I am right. They're attempting to say that based upon the evidence that we currently have, I can make the most responsible prediction, or I can make the most accurate prediction. Nothing is 100%. Nothing is 100% certain, especially as far as therapy.
Are you 100% certain on that?
Well, not quite.
No, right, there you go then.
So, but this is the point, that we invest ourselves in it. We believe in a certain direction, and people then are very loyal to that stance. It was a very bitter pill for me to swallow. Like I said earlier, the book, my first ever book, was entitled "The Secrets of Self-Hypnosis: Harnessing the Power of Your Unconscious Mind." I wrote several chapters in there about still today. It's a best-selling book. It translated in a bunch of different languages, but I've written a different book that supersedes that, and I've had to write an entire section of the opening chapters saying, that and explaining the journey.
I'm sorry for being a dick.
And I had invested in that, and I know it's a bitter pill to swallow. But I'm not coming from a position of naivety. I know what it's like to be in that position where you've got to develop and you've got to move on.
Okay. Well, I think on that note, I just want to. Well, first of all, thanks for coming on, mate.
It's my pleasure.
It was a struggle to get you talking, but when we got there, we got some useful information out of it. I would recommend anybody to check out. I'm holding it up. Don't see it. Adam's book. It's got, for some reason, Science of Self-Hypnosis. How to tap into your unconscious mind. No, not really. No, the evidence way to hypnotise yourself. And if for some bizarre reason it's got a girl pushing a bike through a meadow, I've no idea what the fuck that means, but there you go. Yeah, that's what you designed it. So, yeah, go on. What are you going to say?
No, next time I see you, I'm getting you in a headlock and I'm going to give you one of them nuggies. I'm going to give you a full-blown nuggie. At the same time as Olivia's giving you a wedgie.
I don't know what one of those is, but I'm aroused. So thanks a lot for coming on.
It's been an absolute
pleasure talking to you.
It always is. And
two longs since last talk.
Despite our repartee and our anti-football, our football rivalry, I really appreciate being invited on, and I have a lot of time for you. And it's nice meeting you, Olivier, as well.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. Take it easy.
Yeah, you can.
Cheers. See you later.
So can I stop recording now?
Yeah, please.